I'm Shachar Azani, and welcome to this very special episode of Eye on Israel. What is the making of a Zionist? The word has been maligned on the international stage for too many years, yet more and more people today are claiming back the narrative and carry this badge with honor and pride. As Israel wages a tough war against the industry of lies seeking to undermine its very legitimacy, these Zionist voices shine like stars in the dark. One such star is our guest today. Arsen Ostrovsky is a leading international human rights lawyer. He is a prominent voice in the pro-Israel community, if not the most prominent. He currently serves as the CEO of the International Legal Forum, the ILF, an Israel-based, proactive, global network of thousands of lawyers and activists in 40 countries, standing up for Israel and leading the fight against anti-Semitism, BDS, and terror in the international legal arena, and I might say even beyond. Among its many activities, the ILF have also been at the forefront of responding to the apartheid lies being waged against the Jewish state, while also taking on the United Nations and stopping funding reaching the hands of terror groups. Such a given, isn't it? Arsen regularly speaks before the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, which must be a treat, in parliaments across Europe and to audiences in North America and across the world, including Twitter, where his reach extends in the millions, making the unwavering case for Israel and Zionism. You should really follow him. He also often appears on TV, as well as right here, a constant guest on JBS, as an expert commentator on global anti-Semitism and Middle East foreign policy. He is a regular columnist at Newsweek magazine. In 2018, Arsen was awarded the prestigious Nefesh B'Nefesh Bonei Tzion Prize in Israel advocacy, while the Jewish Journal has said it's his fierceness in defending the Jewish people and the Jewish state that makes him stand out online, but I can assure you, also in real life. Arsen was originally born in the former Soviet Union, where together with his family fled to Australia as refuseniks in the late 1980s. This August marked 10 years since Arsen Ostrovsky made Aliyah to Israel. Arsen is based in Tel Aviv, Israel, with his beautiful family, and we are fortunate to have Arsen with us right here at our JBS studios in Times Square. Welcome, Arsen, and Mazal Tov on your Aliyah anniversary.
Thank you, Shahar. First of all, thank you for that incredibly warm introduction. You know, we've done quite a few interviews, mostly over Zoom together, but nothing beats being here in person with you in the studio. So thank you for hosting me.
You know, the energy one feels when we witness all of your incredible activity on social media and beyond is nothing compared to the energy that you exude right here in the studio. So really thank you, and it's a great privilege to have you with us. I want to ask you something. You know, you make a lot of statements on current issues. Anybody who follows you get to understand, you know, what's happening. If you really want to know what's going on in the UN, Israel, human rights, I want to focus for a few minutes about Arsen the person, because you are one of the greatest Zionist voices of our time. People who follow you see somebody who is unabashedly Zionist, proud to stand up for Israel, and you live in Israel with your family. I want to know what's the making of that Zionist. How did Arsen come to be the Arsen that we know and love today?
You know, there's a famous anecdote about Chaim Weizmann, Israel's first president and visionary Zionist leader. Before the establishment of the State of Israel, he went to London to try and encourage support in the British Parliament for the creation of a Jewish state. And he was asked by a member of Lords, "My dear Mr. Weizmann, I don't understand. Why Palestine, as it was back then? Why Palestine? There's all these hardships and challenges, and it's so far away. Why?" And Weizmann turns around to him and says, "My dear Lord, why is it that you insist on driving 2.5 hours every weekend to see your grandmother when there's a perfectly decent older woman just across the street? So why did I move from Australia, which is about as far away as possible as one can imagine from Israel? I grew up, and my biggest concerns in Australia were which bar do we go to after work, or which football team do we cheer?"
Right.
You know, when I made Aliyah, the taxi driver asked me, "Are you crazy? We have all these problems in Israel, terror, violence, inequality and prices. You moved from Australia, what problems do you have?" I didn't have any real problems in Australia. except one, the fact that my heart was in Israel.
But I just want to pause on this and just take you back a little. Before even you're making Aliyah, people are asking themselves, our viewers want to know, did you grow up in a super Zionist home where the family was heavily engaged in Zionism? Did you suffer continuous anti-Semitism growing up, which propelled you to fall in? How did you grow up as a Jew? And what was your life like, and how did it turn in the direction of Israel in such a beautiful way?
Look, I mean, I grew up, quite honestly, a blessed life. And still blessed in many more ways. I was born in the former Soviet Union, in Odessa, which is now part of Ukraine.
Right.
My last formative memory was being forced to go see Lenin's mausoleum, and then basically the very next day being told by my family, pack your bags, we're leaving. And then we were on our way to Australia, to freedom. In Australia, I grew up, thankfully, devoid of any anti-Semitism. Right. My parents, my family were very Zionist, but not actively Jewish, because they didn't know what being Jewish means. You were suppressed years and decades and generations from being Jewish, from learning Hebrew, from celebrating the holidays and the festivals. So they didn't know what it meant. They didn't know what goes on a Seder table, what you do on Shabbat to speak Hebrew. They didn't know any of that. And by extension, I didn't know any of that. So when we moved to Australia, my parents, I think like many from their generation, took the view that we know what it's like being the other. We know what anti-Semitism is like. So let's try and blend in. Let's try and be like everyone else. We don't want you to suffer what we suffered. Be like everyone else. They did it purely out of sense of protection, and I understand that. So I grew up with a belief in Zionism without fully quite contextualizing, understanding what it meant. It was such an abstract concept, abstract principle. I didn't go to a Jewish day school. My university had very few Jews, if at that. The turning point for me was...
And also, Australia is not like it's on the doorstep of the Middle East.
Correct.
So you are far away, you live a comfortable life by the beaches and the sun.
Absolutely.
So what happened?
What happened? For me, the turning point was 2002. I was at university, finishing off my studies at the time.
Which one?
University of Wollongong in the state of New South Wales. It was about an hour or so drive south from Sydney, on the eastern coast. The turning point for me was Danny Pearl. Danny Pearl was the Jewish American journalist with the Wall Street Journal.
Right.
And he was based in Pakistan. And his last famous, chilling, jarring words, my father is Jewish, my mother is Jewish,
right.
I am Jewish.
Remember?
And then they executed him live on camera. I saw that. And that got me thinking, it awoke me, it got me thinking, what does being Jewish mean?
Up to that point, just a regular life.
Regular life. I mean, up to that point, our family came together for Pesach or Rosh Hashanah, we fast in Yom Kippur, but we did that just as a matter of course, without fully grasping what it means.
Right.
And then Danny Pearl comes into my life, and it awakes me. It makes me think, what does being Jewish mean? What is Zionism? Where does Israel fit into all this? Who am I?
Right.
What are the core values that judge my very way of life and my thinking?
You're describing a literal wake-up call.
It was a wake-up call in so many ways, and it woke me up to a deep process of inner reflection and learning and understanding. It led me to I've been in Israel 3 times, I say. First time on a birthright trip in 2003. I thought I was going to wait until there was peace in the Middle East. I figured, okay, I can't wait any longer.
Right.
So I went in the height of the Second Intifada. I fell in love with the country. And this was 2003. From then on, it was a process of how do I get there? Although I ended up finishing university.
I have to ask you, before that moment, were you in Israel?
No.
No.
No. I'd never been in Israel until Birthright. It was my first
Good for you,
awakening.
Birthright. Great job.
I'm a proud product of Birthright, and then I'm also a proud product then of Masa as well. My second trip to Israel,
Right.
before I made Aliyah, was on a Masa program, where it was an Aliyah trial run for me, because I got to a point I was already practicing law in Australia at the time, but no matter how much I practiced and how many cases we may have won, I kept finishing and looking back. What's happening in Israel? What's happening with the Jewish people? How can I make a difference? What can I do? How can I get to Israel? And so I found a way to get to Israel on a program where I interned at the Knesset of all places. And even still, I've been back to the Knesset.
Little did they know what they had expected.
Little did they know. Little did we all know. And from the first week that I was there, and this is now about 2009.
Wait, it's fascinating just to listen to you.
Yeah.
And it's just a great way to emphasize the importance of the programs that are conducted in Israel, Birthright, Massa, and others that are responsible to a degree for the creation of something as wonderful as Arsen. And I just want to, to build a Zionist, truly build a Zionist. But I'm just wondering, how did your family react? You are about to go to Israel, which is more than just 40-minute drive from Australia.
How did my family react? I'll tell you a story. My mother already knows, so I can say it. So for me, this was an Aliyah trial run. They didn't quite know that. And I'm an only child. I had a very, very successful career as a lawyer at a big law firm, on the track to partnership.
Right.
But my heart just wasn't there. It was very much in the law, but not there. It was in Israel. And so this was a trial run for me. And I went there in the first week in Israel. In the first week, celebrating Rosh Hashanah. I'm on the beach.
Of your internship, that's when you were at
correct, before I even started. I'm at the residence of the president, Shimon Peres. I'm at just a short distance then away from where there was a terror attack. I'm at the Kotel. All this in the space of less than a week. In less than a week, I felt the whole experience of not just Jewish life, but life in Israel. From the good, the bad, the difficult, the joyous, all of that. Every single day.
What did you do in the Knesset when you were there, the internship?
I interned with a member of Knesset there. So from there, I was exposed to the inner workings. I was exposed to the very beating heart of Israeli democracy.
Right.
So I knew there and then I'm going to make Aliyah. But I didn't quite know how to break it to my parents. So instead I wrote an article. I wrote an op-ed in the Jerusalem Post about how I feel about Israel, about Zionism. And the last line was, I know my decision, all that's left is to tell my parents, ... 1 month, 2 months, 3, 4, 5, 6 months have gone past. I still haven't found a way to tell them. And I've already started the application process. And then one day, I'm speaking on Skype. It was still Skype back then with my family, with my parents. And they said to me, listen, we were a little bit bored the other day. So we decided to Google your name. And we came across this article.
That is how they found
out. And they underlined it. Cut a long story short, getting married and giving them grandchildren, I think I've resolved that.
But how did they? Were they concerned? Were they happy with your decision? Were they supportive or not so supportive at first? Because a lot of people, family is a big part of who we are and what we do. And when it comes to Israel, sometimes it divides families, whether it's political lines, whether it's practical lines. And here you are making a decision to launch a new life in a new land, far away from your parents, being an only child. It's not an easy decision. It's not an easy decision for you as well.
For me, it was a very easy decision because I thought if I don't do this now, I may never do it and I will live to regret it. And I'm not the kind of person who lives with any kind of regrets, full stop. For my parents, it was more difficult because I'm an only child and you're moving from a place of safety and comfort, somewhere like Australia, to a place in Israel where, yes, there is terror, where the language is a problem, where you don't have a family. And there is that element of concern. But ultimately, as a parent, and I'm blessed to have 2 children now, and 2 children who are the first Sabras in our family, at the end of the day, you want what's best for your children, what's best for your family, and you support them no matter what. And ultimately, for me, it was making a decision that I can either be an outsider, an observer, watching history literally unfold before our eyes, or I can move to Israel. Or I can shape not just my own destiny, but the destiny of the Jewish people in Israel from within. I can vote. I can live in Israel. I can breathe there. We can speak Hebrew. We can rejoice in our holidays, in our roots where they are. Now I completely and fully understand and appreciate and value deeply so much our relationship with Jews in the diaspora, because I always view that in order to have a strong Israel, you need a strong diaspora. In order to have a strong diaspora, you need a strong Israel as well. But for me personally, the view was that Israel was home. And the one example I'll give you was last year, after the wave of terror, or during, I should say, the wave of terror, during one of the attacks, we had literally just come out of the shelter, and I was holding my 5-year-old, my wife was holding our baby at the time, and I had to do an interview, one of the top radio shows. And they asked me at the end, bet you wish you were in Bondi, by the beach in Sydney, Australia right now. Literally, as I just come out of the rocket attack. And I said, you know what, with all due respect, no. I love Australia. I'm blessed to have grown up and have the opportunities and the foundations that I have, but no. My home is here. My home is in Israel with my people, my country. Just as we grieve together, we rejoice and we celebrate together, and this is home, and no one is going to say otherwise. So for me, when I made Aliyah, when I moved to Israel, it wasn't the culmination of a dream, it was the beginning of a dream. It was the beginning of really my life.
You know, I'm listening to you, and first of all, I can only imagine the hope that a lot of people feel. Because here you are, not growing up, significantly Jewish or in a Jewish day school or high school, and yet that fire which was within you, it wasn't, in its full glory, and it's revealed because something triggered it. And as you mentioned, Daniel Pearl of blessed memory. And I'm wondering about the second phase of that transition, because making Aliyah to Israel is not the easiest of tasks. Israelis are not, we're not the easiest of people. Israel is a very unique society. It's incredible, but it has its share of difficulties. We also, unfortunately, have seen cases where people who made Aliyah were less successful than you. You're a wonderful case of, not just integrating yourself into Israel and being a fully fledged Israeli, but being a true lion of Zion. You stand out there with such pride and honor and dignity and wisdom and wit that anybody who follows you can see. What, in your opinion, is the making of that success? What advice can you give to people who make Aliyah to Israel that may have, a wonderful path like yours?
Everyone makes Aliyah for different reasons. For me, it was ideological. For me, it was a sense of, this is home. This is where I belong. When I close my eyes and think about my future, think about my children's future, I think of them in Israel. I think of them there. That is home. But you're right, it's not easy. And yes, we do have violence. We saw just recently, just the other week, 1,000 rockets fired by Islamic Jihad, and a year ago we had something similar. We see this. We see the Jewish people instead of Israel, being delegitimized on the international stage. We see that. We see economic hardships, absolutely, but you know what? No country is perfect. Let's be honest.
No, but also I think as an Israeli you can see that one of the best parts of living in Israel is especially those parts where they don't frighten us, where Israelis have this amazing sense of coming together when such things happen. Sometimes the worst of times are the best of times.
Absolutely, the worst and the best of times. And when we have those few days, national holidays, when we go from Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day, to the very next day, you have Yom Ha'atzmaut, Independence Day. The only country in the world, the only people in the world that have literally have one day after the other. The siren finishes and then the next day starts. And it's an amazing, you think it's crazy, but it makes complete sense, because in order to celebrate our independence and our sovereignty, we first have to appreciate and respect and honor all the hardship and all those that fell before us as well, the sacrifice to have what we have. And ultimately, for me, it was a very simple decision. I wanted to shape my own destiny, and the best way I could do that was in Israel, was in the Jewish land.
We're talking about the unique sense of camaraderie in Israel, right, between Israelis, but also it translates to a sense of familiarity between Israelis. It's like I may have never seen you, but the first conversations we have are already buddies, and as if we've known each other for 20 years. It's easy for me to approach you in the supermarket or ask you for something on the street, which is not something very common outside of Israel. How did you cope? I mean, how did you adjust to it? What did you think about this the first instance you encountered it? That's an interesting element, a very unique one of Israel.
It is so unique. There are elements of life in Israel that you will not find anywhere else. People confuse Israelis for being very much in your face as insulting, but it's not. It's a cultural thing, and what I love about that is the authenticity about that. They will tell you what they mean, and they don't mean that as an offense, but they're honest and they're transparent. You don't have to hide behind some kind of veneer. You know exactly where you stand. And there is that element of, I think, warmth and sincerity, whether it's, whether in the middle of a rocket attack, you're in the stairwell with your neighbors at 3 o'clock in the morning, whatever it is, together. Your neighbors whom you have nothing to do with otherwise, you're there together as one group, one people. If you go to the, at the post office, you're waiting in line, someone starts talking to you, all of a sudden they know your cousin twice removed from somewhere, exactly. And you're invited to Shabbat dinner.
Right, exactly.
You won't see that anywhere else. So for all the quirks and challenges, there's that sense of warmth and closeness and sincerity that you won't find anywhere else. And you're right, you can connect with people in a way you can't otherwise. And from our perspective, for example, as Olim, as immigrants, you also connect with other immigrants. We don't have any immediate family, right. So you connect with other Olim. And there is always a place for you at a Seder table, that you will never, ever be alone.
Yeah, we made one stage of the journey. We came from Australia all the way to internship into Israel, making Aliyah finally. But then there is another question. Here you are, manifesting your dream. You're in Israel, it's a place you love, you enjoy it, you connect to it so beautifully, you raise a family. You also come with great skills of an international lawyer, wonderful English speaker, a man of the world. You could integrate yourself into Israel's thriving high-tech scene and make a lot of money in those realms, and yet you make a decision to take a different path and not just live in Israel, but also live Israel and represent Israel in all that you do. What made you do that? Why didn't you? Living in Israel is already so much that you've done in making your dream come true. What turned you into that great leader that you are today?
I moved to Israel not necessarily to make money, but I moved to Israel at a sense of Zionism and mission and purpose.
Right.
That's why I moved to Israel. From time to time, fortunate or unfortunate, how you look at it, to speak at the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, this body which vehemently hates us and is hostile with every fiber of its being, that has condemned Israel almost more times than the whole world put together,
right.
That has these commissions and has, countries like Venezuela and Cuba and Qatar attacking us. And when I go there and I speak proudly for Israel, stand with my shoulders held high, and then I get asked when I come back, no, did we win?
Yeah.
No, we didn't win. We never win a vote there because
right.
it's stacked against us. We don't win there. We're slowly shifting minds, absolutely, but we don't win a vote there. So why did you go there, they ask? What's the point?
Right.
It's very simple. Barely 70 years ago, we as a Jewish people, as a Jewish nation, we didn't have a country. We didn't have a voice. We didn't have a home. We didn't have our sovereignty or independence. We have that now. We have our voice, our sovereignty, our independence, our army, and the ability to speak up. So when I see the Jewish nation, the Jewish people singled out on the international stage, when I see double standards applied to Israel that are not applied to any other country anywhere in the world, I need to speak out. I think we need to speak out. And it's not only, I think, a right, but I think it's a duty and an obligation for us to speak out, to stand up for Israel, to fight the lies, to fight the delegitimization, to speak the truth to the whole world loud and clear and proudly so they can all hear.
I'll ask you a question that sometimes I encounter myself. Some people would come up and say, Arsen, it's exactly as you describe. You're fighting against a machine that's already stacked against you. There is no chance of winning. Doesn't it tire you? How can you keep that energy going of standing up against such powerful forces of darkness that have no interest in your legitimacy or even your existence, that work against you on a political level and on a racial level, anti-Semitism and its manifestations on a variety of platforms? So bearing in mind that this work, as described by some, is futile, how do you view it?
So I don't subscribe to the view that it's futile at all. We, I think, have, as I said, not only a right to speak out, but a duty and obligation and a platform. I don't believe that anyone is born an anti-Semite. You learn to hate. As much as you learn to hate, I believe you can learn and teach people to do the opposite, to learn to respect, to coexist. Not everyone who attacks Israel is necessarily an anti-Semite. A large part of it comes from ignorance or naivety or just pure lack of understanding. You know, a celebrity that tweets something, their millions of followers might not know the difference between Gaza, Greenland, or Greece. So it's also, for me, it's a sense of educating, them. Because I don't necessarily subscribe to the view that they come from a place of hate, but possibly from a place of indifference or lack of understanding. So it's also, the opportunity to reach out and engage to people they might not know otherwise. Yes, we have to fight, and we fight unwaveringly and with passion and uncompromising attitude, and to correct the lies and the mistruths and the delegitimization and the attacks. But then we also have to reach out to those people, for example, in between. They might not know better, and try and explain to them the truth, try and explain to them what it's like living under the fire of rocket attacks. Or why, when a UN Human Rights Council resolution against Israel is passed down, why it's not some kind of beacon of truth that you might think, but it's a resolution sponsored by Qatar, co-signed by Pakistan, and adopted by some of the world's worst human rights regimes. Right. They might not know that. So we have to also educate the broader public, and I think that's really crucial to what we do.
I completely subscribe to everything you say, including the passion element of it and the zchut, the right that we have today in doing this, something that we never had the ability to before we were able to reestablish ourselves in our Jewish homeland, and it's beautiful to hear it coming from you. So I just, on an anecdotal level, just please our viewers' ears, tell us a moment of joy in your work, or a couple of moments that made you happy, achievements that made you feel like, your work is worth all of the passion, energy, and much effort that you put into it.
I'm blessed to work in an organization like the International Legal Forum, and we'll be happy to discuss that. The beauty of what we do, we can actually put to practice that sense of frustration, right? Do something with it. And you asked me for an anecdote, I'll happily give you one. You may have heard a year ago, there was an issue surrounding ice cream.
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit. Where Ben & Jerry's, the company, tried to boycott essentially the state of Israel. And now our organization, the International Legal Forum, was one of the very first to initiate legal action against Unilever, the parent company, against this boycott. And by the way, it was initiated with the claimant being a Palestinian, where the case was made that, well, you sit in the comfort of your homes in Vermont and New York, wherever it is, talk about Palestinian rights. Well, here is a Palestinian saying that, no, it's him and his family, his community are the ones that suffer and lose jobs. And if people really care about peace, instead of investing in boycotts, they should invest in jobs, invest in factories, invest in bringing people together. Is really trying to expose the BDS, the hypocrisy, the lies of them. The fact that it's not promoting peace, it's promoting enmity and hatred and disunity and pushing peace further away. We wanted to expose that. And people asked, why did you go so hard after them? Well, it's just ice cream. It's not just ice cream. This is just but a small symbol of the broader fight.
Correct.
If you are now an organization that's thinking about boycotting Israel, you're now going to look at this as an example and you're going to think, do I need half a dozen lawsuits on my head? Do I need a dozen or so states across America divesting funds over $1 billion because of anti-BDS legislation? Do I need the Securities and Exchange Commission looking into me? The IRS? Attorney General's writing to me? No. You don't.
Do I need Arsen Ostrovsky on my tail on Twitter and social media?
You definitely don't need that. So it's a sense of also creating the deterrence effect and making the haters know that there will be a price to pay if they even dare to come after us. And we saw, just in the last month alone, we saw that Unilever decided to do the right thing and reverse this boycott, reverse this discriminatory and racist, anti-Semitic and hateful, illegal boycott. And this was, forgive the pun, a sweet victory.
It's true. It really is a moment of nachat. You touched upon the ILF.
Yeah.
Let's hear a little bit about the organization that you're heading. So I understand it encompasses lawyers from all over the world who come together under the banner of the ILF to pursue those goals. So is it only meant for lawyers? Or do you reach out to the general public in some way?
Not only lawyers. I also understand that everything is based in a legal foundation, but also understand that we're working also with non-lawyers, and we have to communicate in a way that the non-legal...
You do a lot of education.
Not correct. To educate in a way that non-lawyers will understand some often very complex legal arguments. Look, the International Legal Forum is a proactive Israeli independent NGO that is ultimately a global network of some 4,000 plus lawyers and activists around the world that are committed to standing up for Israel, combating anti-Semitism, terror and BDS in the international legal arena. And the way I look at this is, I'm under no illusion that today we as a Jewish people, as a Jewish nation, and by the way, those that value democracy and freedom and truth under enormous assault. We have BDS, anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism. We have challenges on campus, at the UN, in diplomatic, in the economic arena. There is, in the press, there is no shortage. And there's that sense of burning anger and frustration. You want to do something. So what I think is so powerful and beautiful about the law is that it gives us that opportunity. We can use the law as a tool. We can use the law as a weapon for the Jewish nation, the Jewish people, to go after those that seek us
Same like you did with Ben and Jerry's.
Exactly like we did with Ben and Jerry's, exactly like we're doing at the UN, exactly like we're doing trying to stop funding to terror organizations masquerading as civil society groups. We can use the law to not only go after them and make them know that there will be a price to pay, but more importantly, make them know in advance to think twice about acting against us.
One of the main criticisms we hear when it comes to Israel's work on that front of public image and fighting for its name is that a lot of the work is defensive, and yet the ILF presents a proactive, offensive approach. For instance, the suits against Israel and the international legal arena, where Israel is pursued by the International Criminal Court and others, and here the ILF has decided to take action against the Palestinians. Tell us a little bit about that.
First of all, you're absolutely right. For too long, we've been too defensive. And by being defensive, it allows our detractors to set the narrative.
Correct.
And so we are not fighting for our narrative, but we're trying to say why their narrative of us is wrong, why we're not apartheid, why we're not racist, why we're not a pariah, instead of saying, yes, we're proud democracy, a beacon of truth in the Middle East where no other country like that exists. Why we cannot be just defensive. And that's why we insist on being proactive and not waiting for a fire to burn, but we're going to go out and we're going to make them pay. You mentioned about the suit, and that's a fantastic example. Just the other week, we submitted a claim against the Palestinian Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinian PM Shtaya in the International Criminal Court for the crime of torture. But not only against the Palestinians, saying that what the PA and the PA security forces are doing to the Palestinian people, including Palestinian journalists and women and children, LGBT community, and human rights activists and dissidents, that they're torturing them systematically and widespread and for generations. Because, by the way, no one else is speaking out for them either.
Right.
So we will. But in addition, we're also claiming that they are committing acts of torture with respect to the 4 Israelis that are being held captive in Gaza by Hamas, including the bodies of the 2 soldiers, Oren Shul and Hadar Golden, as well as 2 civilians as well, both of whom have mental health issues. And the reason we did that is very simple. The Palestinians are the ones that started employing this, what we call lawfare, using the law, weaponizing the law as a tool to attack us in the political realm. So they went to the International Criminal Court and they said, the PA said that, when they signed up, they said, we claim jurisdiction of the whole territory, including, as they said, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza. notwithstanding that Hamas is in control, and Israel, of course,
Right.
left Gaza entirely, as we know, in 2005. But the PA said, we're going to claim control. And then when the International Criminal Court ruled in their favor that, yes, they have a right to bring proceedings a year ago, ruled against us at that time, they said, yes, you do have jurisdiction over Gaza. So we said, aha. So if they have jurisdiction over Gaza, that means that they too then are liable for what is happening there, for every rocket, every tunnel, every act of terror.
That's actually quite brilliant.
So we said, you know what, in that case, you're also going to be liable for the ongoing acts of torture against the 4 Israelis. So we used the law against them. They opened that door. And we said, you know what, if you want to go down that path, we will make sure that you understand that we will go after you.
So then
and we've gone after them.
So then what did you do? And what was the reaction to your move?
So we prepared, we built, a strong legal case, both evidentiary in terms of the systematic, the widespread acts of torture being committed by the, or in the name of the Palestinian Authority. We also built a case for why this ought to be considered from a legal, judiciary, evidentiary, jurisdictional perspective in the criminal court, and we submitted the file. The court is looking at it now, so this is very early stages, and it's a process that takes a long time, and now there's obviously a lot of focus on what's happening in the Ukraine as well, but they are in receipt of our case, and literally days, just mere few days after that, the UN, there's a UN Committee Against Torture, which for the very first time, only a few weeks ago, actually scrutinized and investigated the PA. And they never scrutinized the Palestinians. They never do that. They finally did. And they actually found systematic evidence of torture by them. So again, the UN, which is, we say there's only 2 things certain, life, death and taxes. The third is that Israel will always be found guilty of the UN. So here we are now using the UN against them because they went there and we said, you know what, you open that path. We will use that against you now to make you understand the errors of your way. So look, now the UN is saying that...
So you're actually seeing results.
We are seeing results.
So anybody out there who despairs or who believes that this work is futile, like I mentioned before, there you have it. A direct example right here about things that actually work. So no reason to despair.
Things that work. You look at, one of the biggest issues today is the issue of funding that goes to Palestinian terror groups that are often, by the way, masquerading as these groups for justice and civil rights and humanitarian organizations. But we know, and we have evidence that, no.
Where the money is going.
We know where the money is going. We know that they are proxy groups, whether it's Islamic Jihad or Hamas or PFLP. And we've been able to demonstrate that with evidence. And often, by the way, it's public source evidence. We've been able to demonstrate that, say that, well, hold on, this organization which masquerades as a Palestinian civil society agricultural group is basically just a proxy or an affiliate for PFLP. And we've stopped money going to these groups, including from Europe, which continues to fund with blank checks. We've stopped millions of dollars reaching the hands of these groups. We've gone and sued a number of these kinds of charitable foundation organizations which do nothing more than are a front, a monetary front for dispersing, collecting and moving money from one place to another, ultimately that are being used for violence and terror and incitement against us. We've gone after them in the courts as well, here in the US also.
Here is another aspect that's very important to remember about you. We see a lot of, fight or discussions about Israel on social media, and suddenly it becomes the end goal to produce a viral video or to go with this amazing tweet. And what people forget, and if they listen carefully to what you're saying now, they'll see it. It's not just about making your voice heard on the social media or media front. It's also having the practical results on the ground. It's a result oriented mission. Just like Israel's public diplomacy is geared towards increased tourism and business and interactions with Israel, so is your work, Arsen, through the ILF and on a variety of stages, to have concrete results on the ground. We will sue the Palestinian Authority. We will make sure that money is not funneled through these fake organizations on the ground. This is a significant statement and move that needs to be echoed across the board, I believe, with every organization that works out there.
Absolutely. No, in everything that we do, there is always a goal, whether it's stopping funding reaching the hands of terror groups, whether it's changing policy, whether it's educating people, whether it's responding to lies. If it's someone like Amnesty or Human Rights Watch alleging that Israel's an apartheid state, we want to change the narrative. And we're doing that with BDS, for example. We're exposing the BDS for the lies and the hatred that it is, and we have managed to win. We're always going to be fighting, but we're winning. And we've managed to label the BDS as an intrinsically violent movement. It's got nothing to do with promoting Palestinian rights, but everything to do with denying Israel our rights. So they are now on the defensive. And you're seeing now that organizations engaging in BDS, they're not saying, it's now being labeled a BDS supporter. That's a bad label to have. No one wants to be labeled as a racist or as a BDS supporter. And also they know that if they do that, we will go after them in the US, where there's some 30 plus states that have anti-BDS laws. And we can use that, by the way, to stop boycotts in Europe. Because if you're a bank, financial institution, and you want to operate in Texas, Arizona, New Jersey, California, you cannot in any way be seen as aiding, abetting, supporting the BDS movement. So we've managed to, I think, transform that narrative. But we need to remain vigilant, because just as we are thinking outside the square, we are pursuing them. They're changing, modifying their behavior. It's like BDS and anti-Semitism is like a virus. Lord Jonathan Sachs, of blessed memory, he spoke about anti-Semitism as a mutating virus. He said, in the Middle Ages, they went for us because of our religion. In the 19th, 20th century, they went against us because of our race. Today, they're going after us because of our nation state. But throughout time, the one constant has been a denial and rejection of the Jewish people to equal rights. So those that do support boycotts, those that do support ostracizing Israel, they're looking at it from a different perspective. They're saying, well, it's not BDS now they're talking about. Well, it's about corporate social responsibility.
Right.
It's about ethical investment now. Whatever the new trend is. So we need to be 2 steps ahead of them every time.
So here is a question that I'm sure is on everybody's mind who is watching you and listening to you at this moment. How do I get in touch with the ILF? How do I enlist my services as an attorney? Or how do I get involved to be educated? Because in my mind, I am hoping to see that moment when that beautiful Zionism that you spread in the air will fall on many ears around the world and will create many Arsens that will grow and be outnumbered, with their passion for Israel. We will see that kind of support. So how do they get in touch with you and the ILF?
Very easy. First of all, I would urge everyone to go to our website, www.ilfngo.org.
ilfngo.org.
They can also follow us on Twitter at @the_ILF, and of course they can also follow my account on Twitter as well at Ostrov_A. We have a newsletter that goes out to thousands of people where we tell everyone what we are doing and how you can be involved, what you can do. We have a network of over 4,000 lawyers and activists around the world, and not just lawyers, people who understand the power of using the law, people from business to schools and synagogues and church groups who have to stand up for Israel, and they're asking us, help us when Israel's being attacked by Hamas, or when groups like Amnesty, Human Rights Watch or the UN are attacking us with these vile lies about amnesty.
Right.
They want to know, how do we respond? How do we respond legally? We can help you. We can provide you the information.
So if you're sick and tired of just sitting out there and complaining on the couch or during Shabbat dinner, then this is a great way for you to be actively involved in making a difference in the world for Israel, and follow Arsen's wonderful example, because it's truly one of the best stories you will see out there. And I assure you, when you follow Arsen's Twitter feed, you will see that it's one of the most prominent and best and most active and energetic pro-Israel voices out there. I do so myself, and to my great enjoyment of being, on the same fighting lines with the likes of Arsen. This is an incredible message that you're providing for our viewers and for everyone who is listening today.
Shaha, we can only do what we do with a network of incredible supporters and partners, including yourself, including the passion, exuberance that you bring. We do this because we love the State of Israel. We are part of the Jewish people. We understand not just the challenges we face, but the opportunities that we can grasp, and we need to always bear that in mind.
Arsen, we speak often, and we have you often on JBS to comment on, the news of the day, and it's always wonderful to listen to you. Today gave us an opportunity to get to know you in person and really understand your core. And it only served to impress us all more and more. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here today at our studios in Times Square. Seeing you in person is such a joy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my friend Shaha. Thank you.
Thank you. Arsen is an amazing example of someone who truly does for Israel and the Jewish people. And to think it didn't come from a Jewish day school, nor did it even come from home. It is a true inspiration listening to his story, and I assure you, following all the wonderful things that Arsen does will be worth you the while. To you, our viewers, I'd like to thank you all for watching. I recommend following Arsen's work and the ILF's work. It can teach you a lot. You can find him on Twitter as well as all over social media, and have him speak and share that incredible information wherever you are. You can initiate that event. You can launch that initiative. You can be proactive in standing up, not just for Israel, but for what's right, what's good, and what's proper. I'd like to thank you all for watching, and can't wait to see you next time as we cast another eye on Israel.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, Post Office Box 360, Stamford, Connecticut 06904. Or you can call the JBS Pledge Line at 833-MY-JBS-TV. That's 833-695-2788. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. We thank you for your kind support.